Hi friends, welcome. Today I want to talk about some street portraits that were taken in New York City. And I'm going to define the term street portrait a little bit loosely today. I suppose a more stringent definition of a street portrait would be a photo taken by a photographer of a subject only after the subject has been asked if the photographer can take a photo of them. I'm going to define it a bit, and I would be curious to know if you guys look at a street portrait that way, if that's how you define a street portrait. Can it come outside those boundaries? I'm going to define it more loosely. I'm going to focus more so on the aesthetic of what a street portrait is and what it can be if we think more creatively about what a street portrait is. And that aesthetic has a lot to do with the proximity to the subject, how close you are, and a clearly defined subject as well. But the goal here is actually to think creatively about what a street portrait can be. So, with all of that said, let's begin. First, we have this photo. This is a rather standard street portrait. We have a man standing here with his cigarette. Seems like a man with a lot of character. Seems like a rather rough-looking fellow. And we have this shadowy, hooded experience, almost like a Jedi who smokes kind of thing going on. We have some snow flying by, and then we have snow on the jacket as well. While that adds a bit of atmosphere, the snow flying by, the snow in general adds some more context to the frame. Okay, we realize it's a cold day. There's a lot of context that is cut out of this shot. We don't see what the background looks like, where exactly this guy is. As we move along here, we're going to find plenty of photos that have a lot more context, and we see the context creatively introduced into the shot. So in this case, photo looks fantastic, but it's a rather standard, tight street portrait. If we move into this photo, we see a boy sitting on a fountain, probably playing in that fountain. And very quickly, I want to mention that this video is actually for me because I have a tendency in a street portrait type of situation to push in pretty close, cut out context, because by doing that, I'm able to cut out clutter. It focuses in the image on the subject. But the problem is a lot of times I will cut out context, and that context can be very useful and can make a photo much stronger. But it can be hard to do properly. So I'm making this video for you guys and for me so that we can try to be a bit more creative with our street portraits. But in this case, we can tell the photographer backed up. And another thing that's interesting is we have a bit of a reverse lighting situation going on here where the subject is in the shadow and the environment is more lit up. The fountain, has light hitting it. And this is hard to pull off correctly, but the photographer did a fantastic job. And the accent of light on the child really helps out a lot as well. The child's not completely dark. But overall, the child in his environment, the way this photo is captured, creates a rather playful photo. We can be reminded to be a child, if you will, and whether we're doing this consciously or subconsciously, we may not be engaging with the photo in a way that's like, man, I really want to go be a child today. But subconsciously, we're probably interacting with it in that way, and we're remembering things about why children are good things for the world. They remind us to be playful, right? Okay, moving on. We have a larger person being playful on a bike. One of the things I love about this photo is you can tell that the photographer was most likely ready here for this to happen. This is a rather cluttered environment, and the photographer was able to organize a frame in a way that made sense. Also, the photographer had a wider focal length, which really helped, because if the photographer had a tighter focal length, you would be cutting out a lot of different things. Maybe we would only have the guy leaning back on the bike and then his friend behind him. That could still theoretically be a compelling photo, but I would argue that this is a much different photo because it's wider. All the boys are separated, which I think is fantastic. And that's another thing that could have gone wrong here. We could have had the guy on the right, the two guys on the right clashing with each other. We can see both of their faces. They're separated quite nicely. But there's a lot of variables in this frame, a lot of things that could have gone wrong, but the photographer was ready, and I'm sure there was a fair bit of luck here as well. Okay, this next one we have what might be a bit of a 50 millimeter-esque type shot. And there's character all over this image. There's tons of context. We have the fact that this guy's reading a book. We have a giant poster of Bruce Lee. Well, I guess it's not giant. It's an average size poster, if we're being honest. But it's prominent enough to make the photo stronger. It's like a little tiny. It's like that big. It's like a postcard of Bruce Lee. We have the Jesus Christ is God book down there at the bottom. We have a bunch of newspapers, and we have the guy also carrying a chair. So it's a little bizarre. We don't know exactly what's going on. But also, if you live in a city long enough, you realize this is very much par for the course. You're going to run into very eclectic individuals like this guy, and the photographer captured this well. So the Bruce Lee poster in this photo is a very big deal. And what I mean by that is, for one, it's another face in the shot. We like faces in photos, even if it's not a real human face in that moment. It is another face that matters. We also have a point of focus here, being his face, being his body. And it's nice and well lit, not too dark. It grabs the eye. So if you're scrolling through on Instagram, this would grab the eye and pull you in. The man's face, the actual person, his face is a bit shadowy and obscured. So it really helps that Bruce Lee's hanging around here. Bruce Lee's always swooping in to save the day, that was his thing. So actually, I know very little about Bruce Lee. I should know more. I hear he's a very compelling individual. But there's probably more about this Bruce Lee poster that adds to this photo, but I can't fully wrap my head around it, I think. It's really important that this poster was here in this case. So we have a tremendous amount of context here because the photographer backed up a little bit, captured a bit more of what was going on. This is one of the jobs of a photographer is to figure out how much context to put in, how much context to take out. Where are we going to focus? And this next photo is another great example of that. This photo was taken by me. You may remember it from a previous photo walk. And you guys may also remember that this guy was a little bit timid at first. He was asking me questions. He was wondering if the reason I was taking the photo was political. Probably had a lot to do with the fact that things were tense in America at that point, and we can argue if things have become less or more tense by now. But as soon as I clarified, he loosened up immediately, and we ended up having a nice interaction. But this shot, once again, is a very tight shot. Now, I tilted the camera up so we could see above his head a little bit. I actually really do like that environment, and adds a bit more environmental context. This photo could have been tighter, though. It's an option. But every little thing that you do to the photo is going to change it a little bit. But I also think that more environmental context, or any level of environmental context, was not actually necessary for this photo to be successful, because there's so much intrigue on this guy's head, right? And so you can make decisions about that as you're shooting. And there are many different answers to that question of how far back, how much you should let in, how much you should cut out. There's no right answer, right? But there tends to be a couple of good answers in that moment. Let's see. And if I would have added other things into the frame, it would have pulled the focus of the photo in all sorts of different directions. And that's a risky thing to do. But if you can swing it, I didn't have much time with this guy. I guess I could have, swooned him a little bit more, but I like to, get people on their way. If I had more time, I could have played around with it more. But in this case, I picked the best one, and that's a good rule of thumb. Pick the best option first, and then you can try the not so good options, which might end up actually being better, but they're a bit more risky. So everything in the frame has a purpose and an effect. Okay, next photo. This was, well, here we have a photo of an interesting fellow with some interesting fashion. I like his glasses, I like his hat. And we have an interesting background included in the shot. So this is something that, this is an example where adding a bit extra background doesn't necessarily tell you where the guy is, but it makes the photo more aesthetically intriguing. So we have these lines coming in and all converging on one point, and specifically converging on the little boop on top of his hat. Some people call it a button, but there's some extra added intrigue because of that. I also love the cool tones. Very nice. Okay, and then we have this fellow who we know very quickly, almost without thought. We just sit here and go, and just that, I mean, I don't know. When you guys think, do you make that sound? That's the sound I make. So you guys may notice that I haven't done that this entire video, and that's because I don't think. It's called a flow state. Get used to it. This could be another 50mm shot, by the way. I'd be curious to know what the focal length is. But we have clever points of context introduced into the frame here. We have the guy. We have his abs, which one could grill a steak on. We have the basketball. We have the basketball hoop. And we also have a guy in the background, which is a little element. It's not something that's particularly profound in the photo, but it adds some context. It tells you this guy's probably in a public place. And then we have the general environment. All sorts of different things, minute details that bring us into the environment of where this guy is. It'd be, it's completely different if he's just standing on a white background with a basketball hoop and basketball and abs that you can cook a steak on. The color palette in this photo is quite interesting. We have a rather blue environment. We have his dark skin tone, and then we have an orange basketball, an orange rim, and then an orange truck in the background. So we have this interesting color repetition that's going on. I also appreciate that the net and the hoop are coming out the top of his head. I think that's a very clever decision by the photographer. Add some intrigue. Fantastic shot. But this is a great example of how it's a very controlled photo. A little bit of context in. Not too much, but just a little bit. And it takes the photo into a completely new place because of that. Now this photo is very interesting to me. There's a nice amount of environmental context here. And I mean, well, actually a lot. If nice isn't a clear enough word. There's a lot of environmental context here, but the subjects are still well established. It would be very different if this photo was tighter in on the subjects. Could still work, of course, but very, very different. Very different outcome. Everyone is well placed here, and they're in pleasing positions with pleasing separation. I appreciate that the hats, that everybody's wearing a very similar hat, but a different color, and it sort of highlights, it's different, but the same, right? And so not only the hat's different, but the same, but it sort of communicates that each of these people are different, but the same. So another thing is that we have one person making eye contact with us, and that draws us in, as opposed to nobody making eye contact with us. Another option, I guess, would be everybody making eye contact with us, but that would change the photo quite a bit as well. It's hard to make a photo with a group of 4 people work. And one of the things that's really interesting here that makes it do work is we have a 3-in-1 type of effect happening here. We have the 3 here in a bit of a cascading fashion on the right. Each head, if you look closely, each head is turning just a little bit more away from us as it goes down until finally we get to the girl on the bottom who's eating the burger or whatever that is. I think that's very interesting. And then we have the one doing her own thing, kind of, separate. And I wonder if she's like a do her own thing kind of person, right? But it feels quite poetic. This is a well-formulated photo with a unique composition. I think it works very well. Okay, finally we have this photo, which I think is absolutely brilliant. In this case, we have a scene that tells you everything you need to know about this woman. I can't tell exactly what she's doing here, but that's not a crucial point of context, right? All of the things work together to help you understand the important things about this photo. We have a mirror acting as a subframe in a really interesting way. It's a very distant subframe. It's not like we were looking through a doorway, right? The subframe is quite far away, and I love when that happens and it's done well. We have a very thoughtful expression on her face, a very authentic expression on her face. We can connect with her in a special way because of this authentic expression. It seems like she might be, thinking about something. Maybe she's just going through a normal day, but she's got some thoughts in her head, as do we all. And a lot of times we aren't able to connect with people in this way whenever we're just going through life and we're bumping into them. Power of photography. But her face is perfectly lit in this case to establish her as the subject. There's not a wrestling match going on here. And many photos I'm taking, I'm constantly dealing with that wrestling match that can occur. And there's a fair bit of luck most times that goes into a photo that is as well lit as this one, as to define the subject so strongly and have the environment still be present, still be completely decipherable, and you can still explore it with your eyes, but it doesn't compete at all. The face and the lighting comes together, creates what we have here, which is a very well-structured photo. So this composition is a clever way to show this person's world, their external world, as well as their inner world, right? This shot would be nuts in a movie, and it's that good. And quite honestly, it makes me want to vomit how good it is. So with that said, I need to go vomit. So that's gonna be the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it. I am trying to expand my pool of photographers at all times. So please feel free to comment below with any photographers that you think are interesting in New York City, Chicago, Tokyo, whatever, whatever, like maybe they're on the fringes of street photography. I'd be interested to hear about any of that. So please feel free to comment. Please feel free to follow me on Instagram or Twitter at James the Red and engage over there. I always love having conversations with you guys. I would greatly appreciate a like and subscribe if you like what I'm up to. And I love you guys. Have a good day.